Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's time for another dramatic Dracula reading. I'm going to turn down our fireplace noise because I'm pretty sure it's too loud. Let me know if that's a good volume, if you can still hear it. We just want it to be like light ambiance. We can hear. Is fine. Wonderful. Okay. So we've got 4 more chapters to read today. Chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. If you missed out on us reading chapters 1 through 4, there is a VOD for that. And it's a fun time. Make sure that you check out the warnings list. There's, some stuff that happens in Dracula. Some of the warnings I'm sure you won't be surprised by. All right. So a fun thing is that we get some new characters in this reading. Very exciting. So we've got new people to meet, new perspectives to enjoy. Again, for any of you who missed the beginning of the book, the whole thing is written in letters, excerpts from newspapers, journals, like all of that sort of thing. And it was actually designed to be written in small chunks that were posted in a newspaper. So if it feels like it sort of jumps around a bit, that's why. But it's very fun to read. The whole beginning, to catch you guys up, to remind you, is about Jonathan Harker, who is a guy from England. He's a lawyer. He's trying to help this random dude, Count Dracula, buy a piece of property in England. He goes all the way out to Transylvania. He's Dracula's guest there. They're trying to sort out all of their things. And he slowly realizes that Dracula isn't going to let him leave, that he is a prisoner there, and he starts to panic and try to figure out what's going on. He realizes more and more that there's something sort of paranormal going on in the house, but he's not sure exactly what it is. He runs into 3 women who seduce him with magic and try to bite him, and Dracula loses his mind. All of this shit. Jonathan's super traumatized. Dracula's having him write letters to his fiancée Mina, being like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And inside, Jonathan knows that these are letters to cover Dracula's ass because Jonathan's never coming back, right? So last we left off, Dracula had left to go to England, and Jonathan was trapped in Dracula's manor. Trying to figure out how he was going to escape, basically. Yeah, at the I love that the way this book starts is Jonathan in a little town, and everybody who finds out he's going to Dracula's manor is like, oh no. like doing signs to ward off the devil and all sorts of shit. And he's like, wow, that's disconcerting, but I suppose I'll continue on my way. It's like, Jonathan, just go home, dude. Oh my goodness. Chapter 5 is page 69 of your edition. Chapter 5 is page 63 of mine. I have the 100th anniversary edition with an introduction by Leonard Woolf. Nah, dog, don't do that. Don't go there. And he was like, but I can't just not show. How British of him. It would be so rude if I just didn't show up, guys. The whole way there, they're being chased by wolves. The guy who's trying to drive him there just keeps vanishing into the night to chase a light. He's like, what the fuck? Oh, well, I guess that's normal in Transylvania. All right. So, are we ready to start off with chapter 5? We'll take a break after each chapter. So, chapter 5 begins with a letter from Miss Mina Murray to Miss Lucy Westenra. My dearest Lucy, forgive my long delay in writing, but I have been simply overwhelmed with work. The life of an assistant schoolmistress is sometimes trying. I am longing to be with you, and by the sea, where we can talk together freely and build our castles in the air. I've been working very hard lately, because I want to keep up with Jonathan's studies, and I have been practicing shorthand very assiduously. When we are married, I shall be able to be useful to Jonathan, and if I can stenograph, well, then I can take down what he wants to say in this way and write it out for him on the typewriter, at which also I am practicing very hard. He and I sometimes write letters in shorthand, and he is keeping a stenographic journal of his travels abroad. When I'm with you, I'll keep a diary in the same way. I don't mean one of those 2 pages to the week with Sunday squeezed in a corner diaries, a sort of journal which I can write in whenever I feel inclined. I do not suppose there will be much of an interest to other people, but it's not intended for them. I may show it to Jonathan some day, if there is in it anything worth sharing, but it is really an exercise book. I shall try to do what I see lady journalists do, interviewing and writing descriptions and trying to remember conversations. I am told that with a little practice, one can remember all that goes on, or that one hears said during a day. However, we'll have to see. I will tell you of my little plans when we meet. I have just had a few hurried lines from Jonathan from Transylvania. He is well, and will be returning in about a week. I'm longing to hear all of his news. It must be so nice to see strange countries. I wonder if I mean Jonathan and I, shall ever see them together. There is the 10 o'clock bell ringing, so goodbye. Your loving, Mina. Also, tell me all the news when you write. You have not told me anything for a long time. I hear rumors, especially of a tall, handsome, curly-haired man. A letter from Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray. My dearest Mina, I must say you tax me very unfairly with being a bad correspondent. I wrote to you twice since we parted, and your last letter was only your second. And besides, I have nothing to tell you. There is really nothing to interest you. Town is very pleasant just now, and we go a good deal to picture galleries and for walks and rides in the park. As to the tall, curly-haired man, I suppose it was the one who was with me at the last pop. Someone has evidently been telling tales. That was Mr. Holmwood. He often comes to see us, and he and Mama get on very well together. They have so many things to talk about in common. We met some time ago a man that would just do for you if you were not already engaged to Jonathan. He's an excellent parti, being handsome, well off, of good birth. He's a doctor, really clever, just fancy. He's only 9 and 20, and he has an immense lunatic asylum all under his own care. Mr. Holmwood introduced him to me, and he called us here to see us and often comes now. I think he's one of the most resolute mans that I ever saw, and yet so calm. He seems absolutely imperturbable. I can fancy what a wonderful power he must have over his patients. He has a curious habit of looking one straight in the face, as if trying to read one's thoughts. He tries this on very much with me, but I flatter myself he's got a tough nut to crack. I know that from my glass. Did you ever try to read your own face? Oh, I do. I can tell you it is not a bad study, and it gives you more trouble than you can well fancy if you have never tried it. He says that I can afford him a curious psychological study. I humbly think I do. I do not, as you know, take sufficient interest in dress to be able to describe the new fashions. It's a bore. That's slang, but never mind. Arthur says that every day. And, there it is, all out. Mina, we've told all our secrets to each other since we were children. We've slept together, eaten together, laughed and cried together, and now, though I have spoken, I would like to speak more. Oh, Mina, couldn't you guess? I love him! I'm blushing as I write, for although I think he loves me, he hasn't told me so in words, but Mina, I love him. I love him! I love him! Oh, there, that does me good. I wish I were with you, dear, sitting by the fire, undressing as we used to sit. I would try to tell you what I feel. I don't know how I'm writing this letter even to you. I'm afraid to stop, or I should tear up the letter, and, well, I don't want to stop, for I do so want to tell you everything. Let me hear from you at once. Tell me all that you think about it. Well, Mina, I must stop. Good night. Bless me in your prayers, and, Mina, pray for my happiness. Lucy. Oh, P.S. I need not tell you this is a secret. Good night again, L. They were roommates. Sorry, I just read that in chat. Another letter from Lucy Westenra to Mina Marie. My dearest Mina, thanks and thanks and thanks again for your sweet letter. It was so nice to be able to tell you and to have your sympathy. My dear, it never rains, but it pours. How true the old proverbs are, and here am I, who shall be 20 in September, and yet I never had a proposal till today. Not a real proposal, but today I've had 3, just fancy, 3 proposals in one day? Awful. I feel sorry, really and truly sorry for 2 of the poor fellows. Oh, Mina, I'm so happy. I don't know what to do with myself. 3 proposals! But for goodness sake, don't tell any of the girls. They would be getting all sorts of extravagant ideas, imagining themselves injured and slighted if in their very first day at home they did not get 6 at least. Ugh, some girls are so vain. You and I, Mina, who are engaged and going to settle down soberly into old married women, we can despise vanity. Well, I must tell you about the 3, but you must keep it a secret from everyone. Except, of course, Jonathan. You can tell him, because I would, if I were in your place, certainly tell Arthur. A woman ought to tell her husband everything. Don't you think so, dear? And I have to be fair. Men, like women, certainly their wives, to be quite as fair as they are. And women, I'm afraid, are not always quite as fair as they should be. And dear, number 1 came just before lunch. I told you about him, Dr. John Seward, the asylum man with the strong jaw and the good forehead. Well, he was very cool outwardly, but he was nervous all the same. He had evidently been schooling himself as to all sorts of little things and remembered them, but he almost managed to sit down on his silk hat, which men don't generally do when they are cool. And then he wanted to appear at ease, and he kept playing with a lancet in a way that made me nearly scream. Ugh. He spoke to me, Mina, so straightforwardly. He told me how dear I was to him, though he had known me so little, and what his life would be with me to help and cheer him. He was going to tell me how unhappy he would be if I didn't care for him, but when he saw me cry, he said he was a brute and he wouldn't add to my trouble, and then he broke off and asked if I could love him in time, and when I shook my head, his hands trembled, and then with some hesitation he asked me if I cared already for someone else. He put it so nicely, saying he didn't want to wring my confidence from me, saying that only to know if a woman's heart was free, a man might have hope. And then, Mina, I felt sort of a duty to tell him that there was someone. I mean, I only told him that much. And then he stood up and he looked, very strong and very grave. And he took both my hands in his and said he hoped that I would be happy. And that if I ever wanted a friend, I must count him one of my best. And oh, Mina, dear, I can't help crying. You must excuse this letter being all blotted. Being proposed to is all very nice and all of that sort of thing, but it isn't at all a happy thing when you have to see some poor fellow whom you know loves you honestly going away looking all broken-hearted, and to know that no matter what he may say at the moment, you're passing quite out of his life. My dear, I must stop here at present. I feel miserable, but I am happy. Evening. Arthur has just gone. I feel in better spirits than when I left off, so I can go on telling you about my day. But, well, my dear, number 2 came after lunch, and he is a nice fellow. An American from Texas. He looks so young and fresh. It seems almost impossible he's been to so many places and has had such adventures. I sympathize with poor Desdemona when she had such a dangerous dream poured in her ear, even by a man. I suppose that we women are such cowards that we think a man will save us from fears, and we marry him. I know now what I would do if I were a man and wanted to make a girl love me. Well, no, I don't, for there was Mr. Morris telling us his stories, and Arthur never told us any, and yet, my dear, I am somewhat previous. Mr. Quincy P. Morris found me alone. It seems that a man always does find a girl alone. Well, no, he doesn't, for Arthur tried twice to make a chance, and I helping him all I could. I'm not ashamed to say it now. I must tell you beforehand, Mr. Morris doesn't always speak slang. Well, that is to say, he never does so to strangers or before them. He's really well educated. He has exquisite manners, but he found out that it amused me to hear him talk American slang. So whenever I was present and there was no one to be shocked, he said such funny things. I'm afraid, my dear, he has to invent it all. It fits exactly into whatever he has to say, but, in a way that slang has. I do not know myself if I shall ever speak the slang. I do not yet know if Arthur likes it. I've never heard him use any. But, well, Mr. Morris sat down beside me, and he looked as happy and jolly as he could. I could see all the same that he was also very nervous, and he took my hand in his, and he said so sweetly, "Miss Lucy, I know I ain't good enough to regulate the fixins of your little shoes, but I guess if you could wait till you find a man that is you will go join them 7 young women with the lamps when you quit." What? Anyway, won't you just hitch up alongside of me and let us go down the long road together, driving in a double harness? Well, he did look so good-humored and so jolly, it didn't seem half so hard to refuse him as it did poor Dr. Seward. So I said as lightly as I could that I didn't know anything of hitching and that I wasn't broken to harness at all. And then he said he had spoken in a light manner, and he hoped that if he made a mistake in doing so on a grave, momentous occasion for him, I would forgive him. And he really did look serious when he was saying it. I couldn't help feeling a bit serious, too. Oh, I know, Mina, you'll think me a horrid flirt, but I couldn't help feeling a sort of exultation when he was number 2 in one day. Anyway, then, my dear, before I could say a word, he began pouring out a perfect torrent of love-making, laying his very heart and his soul at my feet, and he looked so earnest over it. I shall never again think that a man must be playful always, and never earnest. He is merry at times. I suppose he saw something in my face which checked him. He suddenly stopped, and said with a sort of manly fervor that I could have loved him if I had been free. "Lucy, you're an honest-hearted girl, I know. I should not be here speaking to you as I am now if I did not believe you clean grit, right through to the very depths of your soul. Tell me, like one good fellow to another, is there anyone else that you care for? And if there is, I'll never doubt you a hair's breadth again, but will be, if you let me, a very faithful friend." Oh, Mina, why are men so noble when women are so little worthy of them? And here I was almost making fun of this great-hearted, true gentleman. Oh, I burst into tears. My dear, you will think this a very sloppy letter in more ways than one. I really felt so badly. Why can't they let a girl marry 3 men? Or like as many as she wants and save all this trouble? Okay, but I know that that's heresy and I must not say it. But I am glad that I said it, even though I am crying. I was able to look into Mr. Morris's brave eyes, and I told him straight, there is someone I love. He hasn't told me yet that he loves me. And, I think I was right to speak to him so frankly, for quite a light came into his face, and he put out both of his hands, and he took mine, and I think I put mine into his. And he said in a hearty way, "That's my brave girl. It's better worth being late for a chance of winning you than being in time for any other girl in the world. Ugh. Don't cry. If it's for me, I'm a hard nut to crack, and I take it standing up. If that other fellow don't know his happiness, he'd better look for it soon, or he'll have to deal with me. Your honesty and pluck have made me a friend, and that's rarer than a lover. It's more unselfish anyhow. My dear, I'm going to have a pretty lonely walk between this and Kingdom Come. Won't you give me one kiss? It'll be something to keep off the darkness now and then. You can, if you like. For that other good fellow, he must be a good fellow, and a fine fellow, or you could not love him." That quite won me, Mina. Watson, you're not in this book, you silly girl. That quite won me, Mina. It was brave and sweet of him, and noble, too. A rival! And he's so sad. So I did. I leant over and kissed him, and he stood up with my 2 hands in his, and as he looked down into my face, I'm afraid I was blushing, and he said, "Little girl, I hold your hand, and you've kissed me, and if these things don't make us friends, nothing ever will. Thank you for your sweet honesty to me, and goodbye." And he wrung my hand, and taking up his hat, went straight out of the room without looking back, without a tear, or a quiver, or a pause, and oh, I am crying like a baby. Why must a man like that be made unhappy when there are lots of girls about who would worship the very ground he trods on? I would if I were free, but I don't want to be free. Anyway, my dear, this has quite upset me, and I feel I can't write of happiness just at once after telling you of it. I don't wish to tell of the number 3 until it can be all happy. So, ever your loving, Lucy. P.S. about number 3. I needn't tell you of number 3, need I? It was all so confusing. It seems only a moment from his coming into the room till both his arms were round me and he was kissing me, and I am Very happy, and I don't know what I've done to deserve it. I must only try in the future to show that I am not ungrateful to God for all his goodness to me in sending to me a lover, such a husband, and such a friend. Anyway, goodbye. You following? We good? I believe this is the next one. Oh, yes, it is. Dr. Seward's Diary. Let's go. May the 25th. Ebb tide in appetite today. Cannot eat, cannot rest, so I diary instead. Since my rebuff of yesterday, I have a sort of empty feeling. Nothing in the world seems of sufficient importance to be worth the doing. As I knew that the only cure for this sort of thing was work, I went down amongst the patients. I picked out one who has afforded me a study of much interest. He's so quaint. I'm determined to understand him as well as I can. Today I seem to get nearer than ever before to the heart of his mystery. I questioned him more fully than I had ever done, with a view to make myself master of the facts of his hallucination. In my manner of doing it there was, I now see, something of cruelty. I seemed to wish to keep him to the point of his madness, a thing which I avoid with the patients as I would the mouth of hell. Under what circumstances would I not avoid the pit of hell? Hell has its price. If there be anything behind this instinct, it will be valuable to trace it afterwards accurately, so I had better commence to do so therefore. R. M. Renfield, 59, sanguine temperament, great physical strength, morbidly excitable, periods of gloom ending in some fixed idea which I cannot make out. I presume that the sanguine temperament itself and the disturbing influence end in a mentally accomplished finish. A possibly dangerous man. Probably dangerous if unselfish. In selfish men, caution is as secure an armor for their foes as for themselves. What I think of on this point is, when self is the fixed point, the centripetal force is balanced with the centrifugal. When duty, a cause, etc. is the fixed point, the latter force is paramount, and only accident or a series of accidents can balance it. Hold on, I'm double checking. Wait, I'm Dodger again. I'm double checking that this is the right character. 1 second. Hold. Yep. Ready? A letter from Quincy P. Morris to the Honorable Arthur Holmwood. Yeehaw, buds. My dear Art, we've told yarns by the campfire in the prairies and dressed one another's wounds after trying a landing at the Marquesas. Drunk healths on the shores of Titicaca, whatever that is. There's more yarns to be told and other wounds to be healed and another heath to be strunk. Won't you let this be at my campfire tomorrow night? I have no hesitation in asking you, as I know a certain lady is engaged to a certain dinner party and that you're free. There will be one another, our old pal at the Korea, Jack Seward. He's coming too. And we both want to mingle our weeps over the wine cup and to drink a health with all our hearts to the happiest man in all the wide world, who's won the noblest heart God has made and the best worth winning. We promise you a hearty welcome, and a loving greeting, and a health as true as your own right hand. We shall both swear to leave you at home if you drink too deep into a certain pair of eyes. Yours as ever and always, Quincy P. Morris. I'm Arthur now. May 26th, a telegram from Arthur Holmwood to Quincy P. Morris. Count me in every time. I bear messages which will make both your ears tingle. End chapter 5. So yeah, that chapter basically like introduces us to Mina a little bit, but we mostly hear from Lucy, right? Like Lucy's got bringing all the boys to the yard, dude. And Lucy's enjoying it. Like she's sad in the moment to be seeing these dudes sad, but overall is like, oh my gosh, I'm so popular. And I like the reveal at the end of the chapter that like all of the dudes who propose to her are friends. That this dude Quincy's like, oh yeah, the doctor? Yeah, we're buds. We're drinking buddies. And Arthur, the dude, Are you guys engaged? That's amazing. He's also my friend. Yeah, I also like that she starts off her letter. This is a good pee break time, by the way, if you need to pee. But I also like that in her first letter, she's like, I'm going to tell you all about all three of the dudes that proposed to me. She tells you about the first one and then is like, I'm depressed. Never mind. I'm taking a break. Comes back and is like, okay, I'm better now. I'm going to tell you about the second one. And then is like, you know what? I don't need to tell you about the third one. You know, right? You're good. Okay, cool. It's like, Lucy, you don't know how to write shit, dude. She should marry all of them, right? She even said that and then was like, oh my gosh. I can't say that though. I can say that to you, Mina, because we're besties, but you know, no one else should know that I said that. All right. Are we good? We ready for chapter 6? Okay. Chapter 6. We begin with Mina's journal. July the 24th. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever. We drove up to the house at the Crescent in which they have rooms. It's a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct runs across with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, so steep that when you are on the high land on either side, you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, they're all red-roofed and seem piled up over one another anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up on the wall. It's a most noble ruin, of immense size, and full of beautiful romantic bits. There's a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, around which there is a big graveyard all full of tombstones. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town, and has a full view of the harbor, and all up to the bay where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the graves stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I'm writing now with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of 3 old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. The harbor lies below me, with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy seawall runs along outside of it, and on the near side, the seawall makes an elbow crooked inversely. It ends to have a lighthouse, and between the 2 piers there is a narrow opening into the harbor, which then suddenly widens. It is nice at high water, but when the tide is out, it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk running between banks of sand, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbor on this side there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell which swings in bad weather and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here. When a ship is lost, bells are heard at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He's coming this way. He's a funny old man. He must be awfully old. His face is all gnarled and twisted, like the bark of a tree. He tells me he's nearly 100, and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I'm afraid, a very skeptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady in the Abbey, he said very brusquely, "I wouldn't fash mazel about them, miss. Them things be all worn out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for comers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice young lady like you.
Them's feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eatin' curds herring and drinkin' tea and lookin' out to buy cheap jet would creed aught a wonder mazel. Would be botherin' tell lies to them, even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk.
I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from. I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he labored to get up.
And he said, I must gang agin words home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waitin' when the tea is ready, for it takes me time to crammel aboon the grease, for there be many of 'em, and miss, I lack belly timber sairly by the clock.
Anyway, he hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying as well as he could down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town up to the church, and there are hundreds of them. I do not know how many. They wind up in a delicate curve, the slope so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have something to do with the abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They'll be home by this. August 1st. I came here an hour ago with Lucy. We had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the 2 others who always come and join him. He is evidently the Sir Oracle of them. I should think he must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything. He downfaces everybody. If he can't out-argue them, he bullies them and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She's got a beautiful color since she's been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She's so sweet with old people. I think they all fall in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it all and put it down. This is long, so we're going to swap to the NPC.
It be all fool talk, lock, stock, and barrel. That's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and wafts and boggets and barkists and boggles and all anent them is only fit to set bairns and dizzy women a beldering. They be but air blebs. They and all grims and signs and warnings be all invented by parsons and ilsome book bodies and railway tutors to skeer and scunner halflins, and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to. Make me fretful to think of them. It's them that, not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on the tombstones. Look here all around you, and what aren't you will? All them steens holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride. Is a cant simply tumbling down with the weight of the lies wrote on 'em. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory, wrote on all of 'em, and yet in nigh half of them are bean't no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't care a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of 'em, nothing but lies of one kind or another, my gog. But it'll be a square scouterment at the day of judgment when they come tumbling up their death sarks all duped together and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was. Some of 'em trimlin' and ditherin' with their hands that dozened and slippy from lying in the sea, that they can't even keep their grip of them.
I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for approval of his cronies that he was showing off. I put in a word to keep him going. Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong.
Yablins! There may be a poorish few not wrong, savin' where they make out the people too good, for there be folk that do think a Balmbo be like the sea, if only it be their own. The only thing be only lies. Now look you here, you come here a stranger, and you see here a Kirkarth.
I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. So he went on.
And you consait that all these steens and aboon folk be happening here, snod and snog.
I assented again.
Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why, there be scores of these lay beds that be tombed to old Dunn's bacca-box on Friday night.
He nudged one of his companions, and they laughed.
And my gog, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one, the aftest abaft of the beer bank. Read it!
I went over and I read it. Edward Spencelach, Master mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of the Andres, April 1854, at 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on,
"Who brought him home, I wonder, to hap him here? Murdered off the coast of the Andres, and you can say that his body lay under. Why, I could name you a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above." He pointed northwards, "or where the currents may have drifted them. There be the stains around ye. Ye can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. The Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the lively off Greenland in 20. Or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777. John Paxton drowned off Cape Farewell a year later. Old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me eighth rooms about it. I tell you that when they got there, they'd be jomlin' and jostling one another that way, and it'd be a good fight up in the ice on the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark, trying to tie up our cuts by the light of the aurora borealis."
This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old men cackled about it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. But, I said, surely you are not quite correct. You start on the assumption that all the poor people, or their spirits, will have to take their tombstones with them on the Day of Judgment. Do you really think that will be necessary?
"Well, what else be they tombstones for? Answer me that."
To please their relatives, I suppose.
"To please their relatives, you suppose?"
This he said with intense scorn.
"How will it pleasure their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, that everybody in the place knows that they be lies?"
He pointed to a stone at our feet, which had been laid down as a slab on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff.
"Read the lies on the Thruffstein," he said.
The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite them, so she leant over and read, "Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died in the hope of a glorious resurrection on July 29th, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. This tomb was erected by his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't think anything very funny in that." She spoke her comment very gravely, somewhat severely.
"You don't see aught funny. But that's because you don't gom. The sorrowing mother was a hell cat that hated him because he was a crocked. A regular lamiter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she might not get insurance that she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with a musket. 'Tweren't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the dopes to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've oft heard him say mazel. That he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious she'd be sure to go to heaven. He didn't want to addle where she was. This isn't that stain at any rate."
He hammered it with his stick as he spoke.
"A pack of lies. And won't it make Gabriel Keckle when Geordie comes panting up the grease with the tombstone balanced on his hump, asks for it to be took as evidence?"
I didn't really know what to say. Lucy turned the conversation, and she said, rising up, "Oh, why did you tell us all of this? It is my favorite seat, and I can't leave it now that I find it must go on sitting on the grave of someone who committed suicide."
"That won't harm you, my pretty. And it may make me poor Geordie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. It won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here off and on for nigh 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't you fash about them as lies under you, for that doesn't lie there either. It'll be some time you be for getting scarnt when you see the tombstains all running away, and the place be bare as a stubble field. There's the clock. I must be gone. My services to you, ladies."
And off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while. It was beautiful. So we took hands as we sat, and she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage, and it made me heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. Imagine having this completely ridiculous conversation with 100-year-old man and then being like, well, the view's nice. Anyway, the same day I came up here alone, for I am sad. There was no letter for me, and I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, sometimes singly. They run right up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next to the abbey. The sheep and lambs are bleating in the fields away behind me, and there is a clatter of the donkey's hoofs up the paved road below. The band on the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hear the other, but up here I can hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he's thinking of me. I wish he was here.
June 5th.
Ooh.
June 5th. The return of Dr. Seward, Dabs. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. He has certain qualities very largely developed: selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. I wish I could get at what is the object of the latter. He seems to have some settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not know. His redeeming quality is a love of animals. Though indeed he has such curious turns in it, I sometimes imagine he is only abnormally cruel. His pets are of odd sorts. His hobby now is catching flies. He has at present such a quantity I've had myself to expostulate. To my astonishment, he did not break out into a fury as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment, and then said, "Can I have 3 days? I'll get rid of them."
"Of course," I said. That would do. But I must watch him. June 18th. He's turned his mind now to spiders, and has gotten several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them the flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has used half his food in attracting more flies from outside to his room. July 1st. His spiders are now becoming as great a nuisance as his flies. Today I told him he must get rid of them, and he looked very sad at this. I said he must clear out some of them, at all events. He cheerfully acquiesced in this. I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much while with him, for when a horrid blowfly, bloated with carrion food, buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between his finger and thumb, and before I knew what he was going to do, he put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly it was good and wholesome, that it was life, strong life, and that it gave life to him. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment of one. I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problem in his mind. He keeps a little notebook in which he is always jotting down something, whole pages of it filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers adding up in batches, and then the totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. July 8th. There is a method in his madness, and the rudimentary idea in my mind is growing. It will be a whole idea soon, and then an unconscious celebration. You'll have to give the wall to your conscious brother. I kept away from my friend for a few days so that I might notice if there was a change. Things remain as they were, except he has parted with some of his pets and got a new one. He managed to get a sparrow. It has already partially tamed. His means of taming are simple. The spiders have diminished, and those that do remain, however, are well fed, for he still brings in the flies by tempting them with food. July 19th. We are progressing. My friend has a whole colony of sparrows now. His flies and spiders are almost obliterated, and when I came in, he ran to me and said he wanted to ask me a great favor, a very, very great favor, and as he spoke, he fawned on me like a dog. I asked him what it was, and he said with a sort of rapture in his voice and bearing, "A kitten, a nice little sleek, playful kitten that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed." I wasn't unprepared for this request. I had noticed how his pets went on increasing in size and vivacity, of course, but I did not care that his pretty family of tame sparrows should be wiped out in the same manner as the flies and spiders. So I said I would see about it, and asked him if he would not rather have a cat than a kitten.
His eagerness betrayed him, and he answered, "Oh, yes, I would like a cat. I only asked for a kitten lest you should refuse me a cat. No one would refuse me a kitten, would they?" I shook my head. I said at present I feared it would not be possible, but that I would see about it. His face fell, and I could see a warning of danger. There was a sudden, fierce, sidelong look, which meant killing. This man is an undeveloped homicidal maniac, and I shall test him with his present craving, and see how it works out. Then I will know more. Dr. Seward, I don't think that this is the way, dude. I don't think... I don't... Okay. 10 p.m. I have visited him again and found him sitting in a corner, brooding. When I came in, he threw himself on his knees before me and implored me to let him have a cat, that his salvation depended on it. I was firm, however, and told him that he could not have it, whereupon he went without a word and sat down, gnawing at his fingers in the corner where I had found him. I'll see him in the morning. July 20th. I visited Renfield very early, before the attendant went his rounds, found him up and humming. He was spreading out sugar which he had saved in the window, as manifestly beginning his fly catching again, and beginning it cheerfully, with good grace. I looked around for birds, but I didn't see them. I asked him where they were, and he replied without turning that they had all flown away. But there were a few feathers about the room, and on his pillow a drop of blood. I said nothing, but went and told the keeper to report to me if there were anything odd about him during the day. 11 a.m. The attendant has just been to me to say that Renfield is very sick and disgorged a whole lot of feathers. My belief is, doctor, he said, that he has eaten his birds, and he just ate them raw. 11 p.m. I gave Renfield a strong opiate tonight, enough to make even him sleep, and took away his pocketbook to look. The thought that has been buzzing about my brain lately is complete, and the theory is proved. My homicidal maniac is of a peculiar kind. I shall have to invent a new classification for him, call him a zoophagous, or life-eating maniac. What he desires is to absorb as many lives as he can. He has laid himself out to achieve it in a cumulative way. He gave many flies to one spider, many spiders to one bird, then wanted a cat to eat the many birds. But what would have been his later steps? It would almost be worthwhile to complete the experiment it might have done if there were only a sufficient cause. Men sneered at vivisection, and yet look at its results today, so why not advance science in the most difficult and vital aspect, the knowledge of the brain? Had I even the secret of one such mind, did I hold the key to the fancy of him, I might advance my own branch of science to a pitch compared with which Burdon Sanderson's physiology or Ferrier's brain knowledge would be as nothing, if only there were a sufficient cause. I must not think too much on this, or I may be tempted. A good cause might not turn the scale with me, for may I, too, be of an exceptional brain, congenitally. How well the man reasoned. Lunatics always do within their own scope. I wonder at how many lives he values a man. Or maybe only one. He's closed the account most accurately. Today begun a new record. How many of us begin a new record with each day of our lives? To me it seems only yesterday that my whole life ended with my new hope, and that truly I began a new record. So it will be until the great recorder sums me up and closes my ledger account with a balance to profit or loss. Oh, Lucy. Lucy, I cannot be angry with you, nor can I be angry with my friend whose happiness is yours, but I must only wait on hopeless and work. Work, work, work. If I only could have as strong a cause as my poor mad friend, a good, unselfish cause to make me work, that would be indeed happiness. Mina Murray's Journal, July 26th. I'm anxious. It soothes me to express myself here. It's like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time. There's also something about the shorthand symbols that makes it different from writing. I'm unhappy about Lucy. And about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time and was so concerned. Yesterday, dear Mr. Hawkins, who is always so kind,
Well, he sent me a letter. A letter from him. I had written asking him if he had heard, and he said the enclosed had just been received. It's only a line dated from Castle Dracula. It says that he's just starting for home. But that's not like Jonathan. I don't understand it. It makes me uneasy. But then, too, Lucy, although she is so well, she's taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother spoke to me about it. We've decided that I need to lock the door of our room every night. Mrs. Westenra has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go on roofs or, along the edges of cliffs and then get suddenly wakened and fall with a cry and, well, poor dear, she's naturally anxious about Lucy. She tells me her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit. He would get up in the night and dress himself and go out if he weren't stopped. So, Lucy is to be married in autumn. She's already planning out her dresses, how her house is to be arranged. I sympathize with her. I do the same, but Jonathan and I will start in life a very simple way. We shall have to try to make both ends meet. Mr. Holmwood, he is the Honorable Arthur Holmwood, only son of Lord Godalming. He's coming up here very shortly, as soon as he can leave town. His father is not very well. I think dear Lucy is counting the moments till he comes. She wants to take him up on the seat of the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. I dare say it's the waiting that disturbs her. She'll be all right when he arrives. July 27th. No news from Jonathan. I'm getting quite uneasy about him. Though why I should, I do not know, but I do wish that he would write, if it were only a single line. And Lucy walks more than ever. Each night I am awakened by her moving about the room. But fortunately the weather is so hot, she can't get cold. But still the anxiety and the perpetually being wakened, it's beginning to tell on me. I'm getting nervous and wakeful myself. Thank God Lucy's health is keeping up. Mr. Holmwood has been suddenly called to Ring to see his father, who's been taken seriously ill, and Lucy frets at the postponement of seeing him, but it doesn't touch her looks. She's a trifle stouter. Her cheeks are a lovely rose pink. She's lost the anemic look that she had, and, well, I pray that lasts. August 3rd. Another week has gone and no news from Jonathan, not even to Mr. Hawkins, from whom I have heard. I hope he's not ill. Surely he would have written. I look at that last letter of his, and somehow it just doesn't satisfy me. It doesn't read like him, but it is his writing. There's no mistaking that. Lucy, well, she hasn't walked much in her sleep the last week, but there's an odd concentration about her that I just don't understand. Even in her sleep, she seems to be watching me. And she'll try the door and find it locked, and she'll walk around the room searching for the key. August 6th. Another 3 days, no news. The suspense is getting dreadful. If I only knew where to write, or where to go, then I would feel easier, but no one has heard a word of Jonathan since that last letter. I must only pray to God for patience. Lucy is more excitable than ever, but is otherwise well. Last night was very threatening. The fishermen say we're in for a storm. I have to try and watch it and learn the weather signs. Today is a gray day. The sun is, as I write, hidden in thick clouds high over Kettleness. Everything is gray, except the grass, which seems like an emerald amongst it. Gray, earthy rock, gray clouds, tinged with sunburst at the far edges, hanging over the gray sea, into which the sand points stretch like gray fingers. The sea is tumbling in over the shallows, and the sandy flats with a roar muffled in the sea mists drifting inland. The horizon is lost in this gray mist, and all is vastness. The clouds are piled up like giant rocks, and there's a brool over the sea that sounds like some presage of doom. Dark figures on the beach here and there, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, like men like tree walking. The fishing boats are racing for home. They rise and dip in the groundswell as they sweep into the harbor, bending to the scoopers. And here comes old Mr. Swales, and he's making straight for me, and I can see by the way he lifts his hat that he wants to talk. I've been quite touched by the change in the poor old man. When he sat down beside me, he said in a very gentle way,
I want to say something to you, miss.
Well, I could see he was not at ease. I took his poor old wrinkled hand in mine, and I asked him to speak fully. So he said, leaving his hand in mine,
I'm afraid, me dearie, I must have shocked you by all the wicked things I've been saying about the dead. You know, for weeks past, but I didn't mean 'em. I want you to remember that when I'm gone. We old folks, we be daft, with one foot abaft the crooked hull. Don't altogether like to think of it. We don't want to feel scart of it, and that's why I've took to making light of it, so that I'd cheer up me own heart a bit, but Lord love you, miss, I ain't afraid of dying, not a bit. Only I don't want to die. If I can help it, my time must be nigh at hand now, for I be old, and 100 years is too much for any man to expect. I'm so nigh it be that the old man is already whetting his scythe. You see, I can't get out of the habit of coughing about it all at once. The chaffs will wag as they be used to. Some day soon the angel of death will sound his trumpet for me. Don't you dole and greet me, dearie.
He could see that I was crying.
If he should come to me this very night... Holy shit. This voice is very hard to do. One moment, I need water. Oh my god. Push through. Push through for the old man. Push through for Mr. Swales. My immersion is so realistic.
It's the angel of death coming from Mr. Swales, dude.
Okay.
I'm gonna tone back this voice a little bit.
If he should be coming this very night, I'd not refuse to answer his call. For life be, after all, only a waiting for something else than what we're doing, and death be all that we can rightly depend on. But I'm content, for it's coming to me, my dearie, and coming quick. It may be coming while we be looking and wondering. Maybe it's in the wind out over the sea that's bringing with it loss and wreck and sore distress and sad hearts. Look! He cries suddenly. There's something in the wind, and in the host beyond that sounds and looks and tastes and smells like death. It's in the air. I can feel it coming, and Lord, make me answer cheerful when my call comes.
He held up his arms devoutly and raised his hat. His mouth moved as though he were praying, and after a few minutes' silence he got up, shook hands with me, and blessed me and said goodbye and hobbled off. It all touched me, and it upset me very much. I was very glad when the Coast Guard came along with the spyglass under his arm. Well, he stopped to talk with me, as he always does, but all the time he kept looking out at a strange ship. I can't make her out, he said. She's a Russian, by the look of her, but she's knocking about in the queerest way. She doesn't know her mind a bit. She seems to see the storm coming, but can't decide whether to run up north in the open or just put it in here. Look, there again, she steered mighty strangely. She doesn't mind the hand on the wheel. Changes about with every puff of the wind. Well, we'll hear more of her before this time tomorrow. End chapter 6.
Oh, I made a mistake with that old man's voice, dude.
It was worth it for the goof. Yeah, it's all those birds I ate, chat. Wait, I feel like we should add some warnings. As I was reading, I was like, oh no, we missed a lot of warnings. I checked like 4 different sites for warning lists, and yet here we are. If you need to go pee, if you need to grab a drink, like I just did, feel free. Now's the time. We are halfway through. I'm trying to think of how to put this. Like, the way that people talk about the asylum is obviously not the way that we would talk about, like, people who are, like, struggling with their mental health now, right? So, like, how would I write that as a warning?
Yeah, maybe I just write it out. Um, okay. It's long, but I wrote ableist descriptions of mental health and institutionalization. Cool, cool. Okay, I'll give people another couple minutes to come back. I've been getting the Dracula daily emails and I love it. It's a fun way to experience the story. Yeah, I love that. A lot of people have been enjoying that. Somebody was asking if we'll read something else after we've read Dracula. I was thinking about possibly doing I don't know how well this would go, but I like the idea of it. So we've talked about reading the Icelandic version of Dracula, which is a completely different fucking book. We've talked about reading the Icelandic version of Dracula. I thought about trying to read the entire thing in a stream as a charity stream. I think that might be really fun. And like, because I think there's a lot of character overlap, so I wouldn't need to make new PNGs or anything. We would just show up and read like this weird Dracula AU that was undercover in Iceland for years. I think that would be really fun. Okay, are we all back? My throat is dry just hearing you talk about it. Yeah, I'd have to be really careful about the voices that I did. Because otherwise, I wouldn't get very far before I was like, I need to tap out. Okay. Chapter 7. I'm going to be staying on the normal Duger for a little bit here because this isn't a character. Cuttings from the Daily Graph, a newspaper. August 8th, Whitby. One of the greatest and suddenest storms on record has just been experienced here, with results both strange and unique. The weather had been somewhat sultry, but not to any degree uncommon in the month of August. Saturday evening was as fine as was ever known, and the great body of holiday makers laid out yesterday for visits to Mulgrave Woods, Robin Hood's Bay, Rig Mill, Runswick, Staithes, and the various trips to the neighborhood of Whitby. The steamers, Emma and Scarborough, made trips up and down the coast, and there was an unusual amount of tripping, both to and from Whitby. The day was unusually fine until the afternoon, when some of the gossips who frequent the East Cliff churchyard, and from that commanding eminence watch the wide sweep of sea visible to the north and east, called attention to the sudden show of mare's tails high in the sky to the northwest. The wind was then blowing from the southwest in the mild degree, which in barometrical language is ranked number 2, light breeze. The Coast Guard on duty at once made report, and one old fisherman, who for more than half a century has kept watch on weather signs from the East Cliff, foretold in an emphatic manner the coming of a sudden storm. The approach of sunset was so very beautiful
so grand in its masses of splendidly colored clouds that there was quite an assemblage on the walk along the cliff in the old churchyard to enjoy the beauty, before the sun dipped below the black mass of Kettleness standing boldly athwart the western sky. Its downward way was marked by myriad clouds of every sunset color, flame, purple, pink, green, violet, and all the tints of gold, with here and there masses not large but of seemingly astute blackness, in all sorts of shapes, as well outlined as colossal silhouettes. The experience was not lost on the painters, and doubtless some of the sketches of the prelude to the great storm will grace the R.A. and R.I. walls in May next. More than one captain made his mind then and there that his cobble, or his mule, as they termed the different classes of boats, would remain in the harbor until the storm had passed. The wind fell away entirely during the evening, and at midnight there was a dead calm, a sultry heat, and the prevailing intensity which on the approach of thunder affects persons of a sensitive nature. There were but few lights in sight at sea, for even the coasting steamers, which usually hug the shore so closely, kept well to seaward, but few fishing boats were in sight. The only sail noticeable was a foreign schooner, with all sails set, which was seemingly going westwards. The foolhardiness or ignorance of her officers was a prolific theme for comment, whilst she remained in sight and the efforts were made to signal her to reduce sail in face of her danger. Before the night shut down, she was seen with sails idly flapping as she gently rolled on the undulating swell of the sea, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Shortly before 10 o'clock, the stillness of the air grew quite oppressive, and the silence was so marked that the bleating of the sheep inland or the barking of a dog in the town was distinctly heard, and the band on the pier with its lively French air was like a discord in the great harmony of nature's silence. A little after midnight came a strange sound from over the sea, and high overhead the air began to carry a strange, faint, hollow booming. Without warning, the tempest broke, with a rapidity which at the time seemed incredible, and even afterward is impossible to realize. The whole aspect of nature at once became convulsed. The waves rose in growing fury, each overtopping its fellow, till in a very few moments the lately glassy sea was like a roaring and devouring monster. White-crested waves beat madly on the level sands and rushed up the shelving cliffs. Others broke over the piers, and with their spume swept the lanthorns and the lighthouses, which rise from the end of either pier of Whitby Harbor. The wind roared like thunder, and blew with such force that it was with difficulty that even strong men kept their feet or clung with grim clasp to the iron stanchions. It was found necessary to clear the entire piers from the mass of onlookers, or else the fatalities of the night which have been increased manifold. To add to the difficulties and dangers of the time, masses of sea fog came drifting inland, white, wet clouds, which swept by in ghostly fashion, so dank and damp and cold that it needed but little effort of imagination to think that the spirits of those lost at sea were touching their living brethren with the clammy hands of death. Many a one shuddered as the wreaths of sea mist swept by. At times the mist cleared, and the sea for some distance could be seen in the glare of the lighting, which now came thick and fast, followed by such sudden peals of thunder that the whole sky overhead seemed trembling under the shock of the footsteps of the storm. Some of the scenes thus revealed were of immeasurable grandeur and of absorbing interest. The sea running mountains high threw skyward with each wave mighty masses of white foam, which the tempest seemed to snatch at and whirl away into space. Here and there a fishing boat with a rag of sail running madly for shelter before the blast. Now and again the white wings of a storm-tossed seabird. On the summit of the east cliff, the new searchlight was ready for experiment, but had not yet been tried. The officers in charge of it got it into working order, and in the pauses of the inrushing mist swept with it the surface of the sea. Once or twice its service was most effective, as when a fishing boat, with gunwale under water, rushing into the harbor, able, by the guidance of the sheltering light, to avoid the danger of dashing against the piers. As each boat achieved the safety of the port, there was a shout of joy from the mass of people on shore, a shout which for a moment seemed to cleave the gale and was then swept away in a rush. Before long, the searchlight discovered some distance away a schooner with all sails set, apparently the same vessel which had been noticed earlier in the evening. The wind had by this time backed to the east, and there was a shudder amongst the watchers on the cliff as they realized the terrible danger in which she now was. Between her and the port lay the great flat reef on which so many good ships have from time to time suffered, and with the wind blowing from its present quarter, it would be quite impossible that she should fetch the entrance of the harbor. It was now nearly the hour of high tide, but the waves were so great that in their troughs the shallows of the shore were almost visible, and the schooner, with all sails set, was rushing with such speed that, in the words of one old salt, she must fetch up somewhere, if it was only in hell. Then came another rush of sea fog, greater than any hitherto, a mass of dank mist which seemed to close in on all things like a gray pall, and left available to men only the organ of hearing, for the roar of the tempest, and the crash of the thunder, and the booming of the mighty billows came through the damp oblivion even louder than before. The rays of the searchlight were kept fixed on the harbor mouth across the east pier, where the shock was expected, and the men wait breathless. The wind suddenly shifted to the northeast, and the remnant of the sea fog melted in the blast, and then, mirabile dictu, between the piers, leaping from wave to wave as it rushed as headlong speed, swept the strange schooner before the blast, with all its sails set, gained the safety of the harbor. The searchlight followed her. A shudder ran through all who saw her, for lashed to the helm was a corpse, with drooping head, which swung horribly to and fro at each motion of the ship. No other form seen on deck at all. A great awe came on all as they realized that the ship, as if by miracle, had found the harbor unsteered save by the hand of a dead man. However, all took place more quickly than it had taken right to these words. The schooner paused not, but rushed across the harbor, pitching herself on an accumulation of sand and gravel, washed by many tides and many storms, into the southeast corner of the pier, jutting under the east cliff, known locally as Tate Hill. There was, of course, a considerable concussion as the vessel drove up on the sand heap. Every spar, rope, and stay was strained, and some of the top hammer came crashing down. But, strangest of all, the very instant the shore was touched, an immense dog sprang on the deck from below as if shot up by the concussion, and running forward, jumped from the bow on the sand, making straight for the steep cliff where the churchyard hangs over the laneway to the east pier so steeply some of the flat tombstones, thruftsteins, or throughstones, as they called them in the Whitby vernacular, actually project over where the sustaining cliff has fallen away. It disappeared in the darkness, which seemed intensified just beyond the focus of the searchlight. It so happened that there was no one at the proximity of Tate Hill Pier, as all those whose houses are in close proximity were either in bed or were out on the heights above. Thus, the Coast Guard on duty on the eastern side of the harbor, who at once ran down to the pier, was the first to climb on board. The men working the searchlight, after scouring the entrance of the harbor without seeing anything, turned the light on the derelict and kept it there. The Coast Guard ran aft, and when he came beside the wheel, bent over to examine it, and recoiled as though under some sudden emotion. This seemed to pique general curiosity, and quite a number of people began to run. It's a good way round from the West Cliff by the drawbridge all the way to Tate Hill Pier, but your correspondent is a fairly good runner, and came well ahead of the crowd. When I arrived, however, I found already assembled on the pier a crowd whom the Coast Guard and police refused to allow me to come on board. By the courtesy of the chief, I was, as your correspondent, permitted to climb on the deck, and was one of a small group who saw the dead seaman while actually lashed to the wheel. It was no wonder that the Coast Guard was surprised or even awed. Not often can such a sight have been seen. The man was simply fastened by his hands, tied one over the other to the spoke of a wheel. Between the inner hand and the wood was a crucifix, the set of beads on which were fastened around both wrists and wheel, and all kept fast by the binding cords. The poor fellow may have been seated at one time, but the flapping and buffeting of the sails had worked through the rudder of the wheel and dragged him to and fro, so that the cords with which he was tied had cut the flesh to bone. Accurate note was made of the state of things, and a doctor, Surgeon J.M. Caffin, 33 East Elliott Place, came immediately after me and declared, after making examination, that the man must have been dead for quite 2 days. In his pocket was a bottle, carefully corked, empty, save for a little roll of paper, which proved to be the addendum to the log. The Coast Guard said the man must have tied up his own hands, fastened the knots with his teeth. The fact that a Coast Guard was the first on board may save some complication later on in the Admiralty Court, for the Coast Guards cannot claim the salvage, which is the right of the first civilian entering on a derelict. Already, however, the legal tongues are wagging, and one young law student is loudly asserting that the rights of the owner are already completely sacrificed, his property being held in contravention of the statutes of Mortmain, since the tiller, as emblemship if not proof of delegated possession, is held in a dead hand. It is needless to say that the dead steersman has been reverently removed from the place where he held his honorable watch and ward until death, a steadfastness as noble as that of young Casabianca, and placed in the mortuary to await inquest. Already the sudden storm is passing, its fierceness abating, crowds scattering homeward, and the sky is beginning to redden over the Yorkshire wolds. I shall send in time for your next issue further details of the derelict ship, which found her way so miraculously into harbor in the storm. So, that was a lot of description, but basically a huge storm showed up out of nowhere, and the whole town was like concerned about all of these boats that are out on the water, right? So boats are coming in. They've got the new lighthouse all set up. They're trying to make sure that everybody gets back in safe. Every time a boat comes in safe, everybody on the cliff in this town who's watching is like, yes, another boat got in, we're good. But there's a schooner that people have been seeing since early evening, like before the storm really took off. There's a schooner that's just been kind of like flopping around out on the water. And it basically crashes onto the sand. And when they go to inspect it, a dog has run off of the boat. A big black dog just like emerged from below deck and ran off. And a dead man is tied to the helm. So they're now discussing like, how much can we inspect this vessel, which we do about the body, all of that. Continuing on. Whitby on August 9th. The sequel to the strange arrival of the derelict in the storm last night is almost more startling than the thing itself. It turns out the schooner is a Russian from Varna. It's called the Demeter. Or the Demeter? Oof. I never know how to pronounce that. Demeter, I think, is how they pronounce it in Hades. I'll go with that. She's almost entirely in ballast of silver sand with only a small amount of cargo, a number of great wooden boxes filled with mold. This cargo was consigned to the Whitby solicitor, Mr. S.F. Billington, of 7 the Crescent, who this morning went aboard and formally took possession of the goods consigned to him. The Russian consul, too, acting for the charter party, took formal possession of the ship and paid all harbor dues, etc. Nothing is talked about here today, except the strange coincidence. The officials of the Board of Trade have been most exacting in seeing that every compliance has been made with existing regulations. As the matter is to be a 9 days wonder, they are evidently determined that there shall be no cause of after complaint. A good deal of interest was abroad concerning the dog which landed when the ship struck, and more than a few of the members of the SPCA, which is very strong in Whitby, have tried to befriend the animal. To the general disappointment, however, it was not to be found. It seems to have disappeared entirely from the town. It may be that it was frightened and made its way to the moors, where it is still hiding in terror. There are some who look with dread on such a possibility, lest later on it should in itself become a danger. It is evidently a fierce brute. And early this morning a large dog, a half-bred mastiff belonging to a coal merchant close to Tate Hill Pier, was found dead in the roadway opposite its master's yard. It had been fighting, and manifestly it had a savage opponent. Its throat was torn away, its belly slit open, as if by a savage claw. By the kindness of the Board of Trade Inspector, I have been permitted to look over the logbook of the Demeter, which was in order up to within 3 days, but contained nothing of special interest except as to facts of missing men. The greatest interest, however, is with regard to the paper found in the bottle, which was today produced at the inquest, and a more strange narrative than the two between them unfolded as has not been my lot to come across. As there is no motive for concealment, I am permitted to use them, and accordingly send you a rescript, simply omitting technical details of seamanship and supercargo. It almost seems as though the captain had been seized with some kind of mania before he had got well into blue water, that this had developed persistently throughout the voyage. Of course, my statements must be taken cum grano, since I am writing from the dictation of a clerk of the Russian consul, who kindly translated for me, time being short. The Log of the Demeter, Varna to Whitby. Written July 18th. Things so strange happening that I shall keep accurate note henceforth until we land. On July 6th, we finished taking in cargo, silver sand, and boxes of earth. At noon, set sail, east wind, fresh, crew, 5 hands, 2 mates, cook, and myself, the captain. On July 11th, at dawn, entering Bosphorus, boarded by Turkish customs officers, bakshish, all correct, underway at 4 p.m. On July 12th, through Dardanelles, more customs officers, and flagboat of guarding squadron, bakshish again, work of officers throughout, but quick. Want us off soon. At dark, passed into archipelago. On July 13, past Cape Matapan, crew dissatisfied about something. They seemed scared, but would not speak out. On July 14th, was somewhat anxious about the crew. Men, all steady fellows who sailed with me before. Mate could not make out what was wrong. They only told him that there was something, and then crossed themselves. Mate lost temper with one of them that day and struck him, and expected a fierce quarrel, but it was quiet. On July 16th, mate reported in the morning that one of the crew, Petrovsky, was missing. Could not account for it. Took larboard. Watch 8 bells last night. Was relieved by Abramoff, but did not go to their bunk. Men more downcast than ever. All said they expected something of the kind, but would not say more than there was something aboard. Mate getting very impatient, but feared some trouble ahead. On July 17th, yesterday, one of the men, Olgaren, came to my cabin and in an awestruck way confided to me he thought there was a strange man on the ship. He said that in his watch he had been sheltering behind the deck house as there was a rainstorm when he saw a tall, thin man who was not like any of the crew, came up the companionway and went along the deck forward and disappeared. He followed cautiously, but when he got to bows found no one, and the hatchways were all closed. He was in a panic of superstitious fear, and I'm afraid the panic may have spread. To allay it, I shall today search the entire ship carefully, from stem to stern. Later in the day, I got together the whole crew and told them, as they evidently thought there was someone on the ship, that we would search from stem to stern. First mate was angry, said it was folly, and to yield to such foolish ideas would demoralize the men. Said he would engage to keep them out of trouble with a handspike. I let him take the helm, while the rest began the search, all keeping abreast with lanterns, and we left no corner unsearched. As there were only the big wooden boxes, there were no odd corners where a man could hide. Men much relieved when the search was over. They went back to work cheerfully. The first mate scowled, but said nothing. July 22nd. Rough weather the last 3 days. All hands are busy with sails, so no time to be frightened. Men seem to have forgotten their dread. Mate is cheerful again. All on good terms. Praised the men for work in bad weather. Past Gibraltar, out through the straits. All is well. July 24th. There seems some doom over this ship, already a hand short, entering on the Bay of Biscay with wild weather ahead, and yet, last night another man is lost, disappeared. Like the first, he came off his watch and was not seen again. Men are all in a panic of fear, sent a round robin, asking to have double watch. They're scared to be alone. Mate is angry, fears there will be trouble. Either he or the men will do violence. July 28th. 4 days in hell, knocking about in the sort of maelstrom in the wind of a tempest. No sleep for anyone. The men are worn out. Hardly know how to set a watch, since no one fit to go on. Second mate volunteered to steer and watch and let the men snatch a few hours' sleep. The wind is abating. Seas are terrific, but we feel them less. The ship is steadier. July 29th. Another tragedy. Had single watch tonight. Crew is too tired to double. When morning watch came on deck, we could find no one except the steersman. raised an outcry, and everyone came on deck. A thorough search, but no one was found. We are now without a second mate, and the crew is in a panic. The mate and I agreed to go armed henceforth and wait for signs of cause. July 30th. Last night we rejoiced we are nearing England. The weather is fine. All sails are set. We're tired or worn out. Slept soundly, awakened by the mate telling me that both men of watch and steersman are missing. Only self and mate and 2 hands are left working the ship. August 1st. 2 days of fog, not a sail sighted. I had hoped when in the English Channel we would be able to signal for help, or get in somewhere. Not having power to work sails, having to run before wind. We dare not lower, we could not raise them again. We seem to be drifting to some terrible doom. Mate is now more demoralized than either of the men. His strong nature seems to have worked inwardly against himself. The men are beyond fear, working stolidly and patiently, with minds made up to worst. They are Russian, and he is Romanian. August 2nd, midnight. Woke up a few minutes' sleep by hearing a cry seemingly outside of my port. I could see nothing in the fog. I rushed on deck and ran against the mate, who tells me they heard a cry and ran, but no signs of the men on watch. One more gone, Lord help us. Mate says we must be past the Straits of Dover, as in the moment of fog lifting he saw North Foreland, just as he had heard the man cry out. If so, we're now off in the North Sea. Only God can guide us in this fog, which seems to have moved with us, and God has deserted us. August 3rd. At midnight, I went to relieve the man at the wheel. When I got to, I found no one. The wind was steady. As we ran before it, there was no yawning, and I dared not leave. So I shouted for the mate, and after a few seconds he rushed up on deck in his flannels. He looked wild-eyed and haggard, and I greatly feared his reason had given way. He came close to me and whispered hoarsely with his mouth to my ear, as though fearing the very air might hear. It is here. I know it now. On the watch last night I saw it, like a man, tall, thin, and ghastly pale. In the bows and looking out, I crept behind it and gave it my knife, but the knife went through it, empty as air. As he spoke, he took his knife and drove it savagely into space. He went on. Might as well use this. It is here, and I'll find it. It's in the hold, perhaps in one of those boxes. I'll unscrew them one by one and see. You work the helm. With a warning look and his finger on his lip, he went below, and there was springing up a choppy wind, and I could not leave the helm. I saw him come out on deck again with a tool chest and a lantern and go down the forward hatchway. He's mad, stark raving mad, and it's no use my trying to stop him. He can't hurt those big boxes. They're invoiced as clay. To pull them about is as harmless as a thing he can do. So here I stay and mind the helm and write my notes. I can only trust in God and wait until this fog clears, and then, if I can't steer to any harbor with the wind as it is, I shall cut down the sails and lie by and signal for help. It's nearly over now, just as I was beginning to hope that the mate would come out calmer. I heard him knocking away at something in the hold. Work is good for him. But there came up the hatchway a sudden, startled scream which made my blood run cold, and up on the deck he came as if shot from a gun, a raging madman with his eyes rolling and his face convulsed with fear. Save me, he cried, and then looked around on the blanket of fog. His horror turned to despair, and in a steady voice he said, You had better come to, Captain, before it's too late. He's there. I know the secret now. The sea will save me from him. It's all that's left. And before I could say a word or move forward to seize him, he sprang on the bulwark and deliberately threw himself into the sea. I suppose I know the secret too now. It was this madman who had gotten rid of the men one by one, and now he has followed them himself. God help me. How am I to account for all these horrors when I get to port? When I get to port, when will that ever be? August 4th. Still fog, which the sunrise cannot pierce. I know there is sunrise because I am a sailor, and why else I know not. I dared not go below. I dared not leave the helm. So here all night I stayed, and in the dimness of the night I saw it. Him. God forgive me. The mate was right to jump overboard. It was better to die like a man, die like a sailor in blue water that no man can object, but I am a captain, and I must not leave my ship. I shall baffle this fiend or monster. I'll tie my hands to the wheel when my strength begins to fail, and along with them I shall tie that which it, dares not touch. And then, come good wind or foul, I shall save my soul and my honor as a captain. I'm growing weaker, and the night is coming on. If he can look me in the face again, I may not have time to act. If we are wrecked, mayhap this bottle may be found, and those who find it may understand, but if not, well, then all men shall know that I have been true to my trust. God and the Blessed Virgin and the saints help a poor, ignorant soul trying to do his duty. Of course, the verdict was an open one. There's no evidence to adduce, and whether or not the man himself committed the murders there is now none to say. The folk here hold almost universally that the captain is simply a hero, that he is to be given a public funeral. Already it is arranged that his body is to be taken with a train of boats up the Esk for a peace, and then brought back to Tate Hill Pier and up the Abbey steps, for he is to be buried in the churchyard on the cliff. The owners of more than 100 boats have already given in their names as wishing to follow him to the grave. No trace has ever been found of the great dog, at which there is much mourning, for with public opinion in its present state, he would, I believe, be adopted by the town. Tomorrow we will see the funeral, and so will end this one more mystery of the sea. So, one thing that I didn't say is at the beginning of the chapter's not quite done yet, almost though. At the beginning of the chapter, it says that all of this, these are all, like, clippings from a newspaper that has been posted in Mina's journal. So she's read all of this and deemed it like relevant and important and put it in her journal. So now, this is followed up by Mina's next journal entry. August 8th. Lucy was very restless all night, and I too could not sleep. The storm was fearful. As it boomed loudly among the chimney pots, it made me shudder. When a sharp puff came, it deemed to be like a distant gun. Strangely enough, Lucy didn't wake, but she did get up twice and dress herself. Fortunately, each time I awoke in time and managed to undress her without waking her and got her back into bed. It's a very strange thing, this sleepwalking. As soon as her will is thwarted in any physical way, her intention, if there be any, it disappears. She yields herself almost exactly to the routine of her life. Early in the morning, we both got up and went down to the harbor to see if anything had happened in the night. There were very few people about, and though the sun was bright and the air clear and fresh, the big, grim-looking waves that seemed dark themselves because the foam that topped them was like snow, forced themselves in through the narrow mouth of the harbor, like a bullying man going through a crowd. Somehow, I felt glad that Jonathan was not on the sea last night, but on land. But is he? Is he on land or sea? Where is he? And how? I'm getting fretfully, fearfully anxious about him. If I only knew what to do. And if I could do anything. August 10th. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbor seems to be there, and the coffin was carried by the captains all the way from Tate Hill Pier up to the churchyard. Lucy came with me. We went early to our old seat, whilst the cortege of boats went up the river to the viaduct and came down again. We had a lovely view, and saw the procession nearly all the way. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat, so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy, she seemed much upset. She was restless and uneasy all the time. I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She's quite odd in the one thing. She won't admit to me that there is any cause for restlessness, or if there be, she doesn't understand it. There is an additional cause, in that poor old Mr. Swales was found dead this morning on our seat. His neck was broken. Well, he had evidently, as the doctor said, fallen back in the seat in some sort of fright. There was a look of fear and horror on his face. The men said it made them shudder. Oh, the poor old dear man. And perhaps he had seen death with his dying eyes. Lucy is so sweet and sensitive. She feels influences more acutely than other people do. Just now she was quite upset by a little thing which I did not much heed, though I am myself fond of animals. One of the men who came up here often to look for the boats was followed by his dog. The dog is always with him. They're both very quiet persons. I never saw the man angry, and I never heard the dog bark. During the service, the dog wouldn't come to its master. The one who was on the seat with us. He kept a few yards off, barking and howling, and its master spoke to it gently and then harshly and then angrily. It would neither come nor cease to make noise. It was in a sort of fury. Its eyes were savage, all its hair bristling out like a cat's tail when a puss is on the warpath. And finally, this man, too, got angry and jumped down and kicked the dog, and then threw it by the scruff of the neck and half dragged and threw it on the tombstone on which the seat is fixed. Well, the moment it touched the stone, the poor thing became quiet, and it fell into a tremble. It did not try to get away. It crouched down, it quivered and cowered, and was in such a pitiable state of terror that I tried, though without effect, to comfort it. And Lucy was so full of pity, too, but she didn't attempt to touch the dog. She just looked at it in an agonized sort of way. I greatly fear that she is too supersensitive a nature to go through the world without trouble. She'll be dreaming of this tonight, I'm sure of it. The whole agglomeration of things. The ship steered into port by a dead man, his attitude, tied to the wheel with a crucifix. The funeral, the dog. The dog. Now furious and in terror. Oh, it will all afford material for her dreams. I think it will be best for her to go to bed tired, physically. I'll take her for a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood Bay and back. She ought not have much inclination for sleepwalking then. End chapter 7. One last chapter to go. So, Mina has gone to visit her friend Lucy. They hang out. Mina's like, where the hell is Jonathan? I haven't heard from him in forever. What's going on? And Lucy's like, I don't know, but have you heard about all the boys who are in love with me? And Mina's like, no, something weird's going on here. Jonathan's letters are weird. Everything about this is weird. The boat was weird. This funeral is weird. But, like, I'm also distracted because my friend keeps fucking sleepwalking. Robin Hood's Bay is beautiful, but very hilly. That's good to know. Yeah, someone was saying Whitby in general is really nice. Is there a schedule for the readings? I caught this and the previous session by chance. No. So both of these readings have been what are called community challenges in the Channel Point redemptions. So once we're done with this one, we'll do a new challenge for chapters. What would it be? 9 through 12. And yeah, and then once it's met, I just choose a Friday night when I'm free, and we read Dracula. Mina's tired of the bullshit. Mina's like, you know, a schoolmistress and learning shorthand and like all this other. She's busy, dude. Her fiance is fucking missing in another country. She's got a lot going on, dude. This will be our last break because this is the final chapter. So if you need to pee or anything, now's the time. How many chapters are there total? We are on nearly page 100, page 99 currently, out of 381 pages. So it'll take us a while to get through all of Dracula, but number of chapters, there are 27. Yeah, it's fun. I like doing the reading. It's fun, it's fun. despite the spookiness. Yeah. Hi, kitties. Hello. Oh, both kitties came to say hi. Ever thought about audiobook narration? I feel like narrating books, like doing audiobook recordings, is probably really hard. You're really good at reading. Thank you. I did go. Yes, I have a degree in theater. I do. But I'm glad you enjoy the reading. Thanks, guys. I'm glad you're enjoying. How's life and family? Everything's good, yeah. My kid's starting school soon. That's pretty crazy. The Audible version of Dracula has Tim Curry and Alan Cumming in it as readers. Oh my god, I bet that's amazing. That would be very fun. A read through of old Sherlock Holmes stories. That would be very fun. Okay. Are we ready for the final chapter? In my head, your kid is a baby. She's 4. She's starting the equivalent of kindergarten out here. Also, Matt in the chat and John486, thank you very much for subscribing, guys. Appreciate it. All right, let's go. Chapter 8, our final chapter for the day. Mina Murray's journal. 11 o'clock p.m. the same day. Oh, but I am tired. If it were not that I had made my diary a duty, I should not open it tonight. Well, we had a lovely walk. Lucy, after a while, was in gay spirits, owing, I think, to some dear cows who came nosing toward us in a field close to the lighthouse. It frightened the wits out of us. I believe we forgot everything except, of course, personal fear. It seemed to wipe the slate clean and give us a fresh start. We had a capital severe tea at Robin Hood's Bay in a sweet little old-fashioned inn with a bow window right over the seaweed-covered rocks of the Strand. I believe we should have shocked the new woman with our appetites. Men are more tolerant, bless them. We walked home with some, or rather many, stoppages to rest, with our hearts full of a constant dread of wild bulls. Lucy was really tired. We intended to creep off to bed as soon as we could. The young curate came in, however, and Mrs. Westenra asked him to stay for supper, so Lucy and I had both a fight for it with the dusty miller. I know it was a hard fight on my part, and I am quite heroic. I think that someday the bishops must get together and see about breeding up a new class of curates who don't take supper, no matter how they may be pressed to, and who will know when girls are tired. Lucy's asleep and breathing softly. She has more color in her cheeks than usual and she just looks sweet. If Mr. Holmwood fell in love with her seeing her only in the drawing room, I wonder what he would say if he saw her now. Some of the new women writers will someday start an idea that men and women should be allowed to see each other asleep before proposing or accepting. I suppose the new women won't condescend in future to accept. She will do the proposing herself. And a nice job she would make of it, too. There's some consolation in that. I'm happy tonight. Dear Lucy seems better. I really believe she's turned the corner, and that we're over the troubles with dreaming. And now I just should be so happy if I knew of Jonathan. God bless and keep him. August 11th at 3 a.m. Diary again. No sleep now, so I might as well write. I'm agitated. Too agitated to sleep. We've had such an adventure, an agonizing experience. I fell asleep as soon as I closed my diary, and suddenly I was broad awake, sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me and some feeling of emptiness. The room was dark, and I couldn't see Lucy's bed, so I stole across and felt for her. But the bed was empty, so I lit a match and found that she wasn't in the room. The door was shut, but not locked, as I had left it. I feared waking her mother, who had been more than usually ill lately, so I threw on some clothes and I got ready to look for her. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes she wore might give me some clue to her dreaming intention. A dressing gown would mean the house, a dress outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in their places. Well, thank God, I said to myself. Well, she can't be far. She's only in her nightdress. So I ran downstairs. I looked in the sitting room, not there. I looked in the other open rooms of the house with an ever-growing fear chilling my heart. And finally I came to the hall door and I found it open. It wasn't wide open, but the catch of the lock hadn't been caught. The people of the house are very careful to lock the door every night. I feared Lucy must have gone out as she was. There was no time to think of what to happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all of the details, so... Well, I took a big, heavy shawl and I ran out. The clock was striking 1 as I was in the crescent and there wasn't a soul in sight. I ran along the north terrace. I couldn't see a sign of the white figure that I expected. At the edge of the west cliff, above the pier, I looked across the harbor to the east cliff. In hope or fear, I don't know which, of seeing Lucy in our favorite seat. There was a bright full moon, heavy black drifting clouds, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two, I could see nothing as the shadow of a cloud obscured St. Mary's Church and all around it. And then, as the cloud passed, I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view. And as the edge of a narrow band of light, as sharp as a sword cut, moved along, the church and the churchyard became gradually visible. Whatever my expectation was, it was not disappointed. There on our favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. The coming of the cloud was too quick for me to see much, for shadow shut down on light almost immediately, but it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone, and bent over. What it was, man or beast, I couldn't tell. And I didn't wait to catch another glance. I flew down the steep steps to the pier and along by the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seemed as dead. Not a soul did I see, and I rejoiced that it was so. I wanted no witness of poor Lucy's condition. The time and distance seemed endless. My knees trembled. My breath came labored as I toiled up the endless steps to the abbey. I must have gone fast, yet it seemed to me as if my feet were weighted with lead, as though every joint in my body was rusty. When I got almost to the top, I could see the seat and the white figure, and I was now close enough to distinguish it even through the spells of shadow. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure, and I called in fright, "Lucy! Lucy!" Something raised a head, and from where I was I could see a white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy didn't answer. I ran on to the entrance of the churchyard. As I entered, the church was between me and the seat, and for a minute or so I lost sight of her, but when I came in view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that I could see Lucy, half reclining with her head lying over the back of the seat. She was quite alone. Not a sign of any living thing about. When I bent over her, I could see that she was still asleep, her lips parted, and she was breathing, not softly as usual with her, but in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full of every breath. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress closed around her throat. When she did so, there came a little shudder, as though she felt cold. I flung the warm shawl over her and drew the edges tight around her neck. I dreaded lest she should get some deadly chill from the night air, unclad as she was. I feared to wake her all at once, so in order to have my hands free that I might help her, I fastened the shawl at her throat, and with a big safety pin, I must have been clumsy in my anxiety and pinched or pricked her with it. When her breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat again and moaned. When I had her carefully wrapped up, I put my shoes on her feet and began very gently to wake her. At first she didn't respond. Gradually, she became more and more uneasy in her sleep, moaning, sighing occasionally. At last, as time was passing fast and for many other reasons, I wished to get her home at once. I shook her more forcibly till finally she opened her eyes and woke up, but she didn't seem surprised to see me. Of course, she didn't even realize where she was. Lucy always wakes so prettily, even at such a time when her body must have been chilled and cold, and her mind somewhat appalled at waking unclad in a churchyard at night. She still didn't lose her grace. She trembled a little. She clung to me. When I told her to come at once with me home, she rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. As we passed along, the gravel hurt my feet. Lucy noticed me wincing. She stopped and wanted to insist upon my taking the shoes, but I wouldn't. When we got to the pathway outside of the churchyard, where there was a puddle of water remaining from the storm, I daubed my feet with mud, using each foot in turn on the other. So as we went home, no one, in case we should meet anyone, should notice my bare feet. Fortune favored us. We got home without meeting a soul. Once we saw a man, who seemed not quite sober, passing along a street in front of us, but we just hid in a door until he disappeared up an opening, such as there are here. Steep little closes, or wynds, as they call them in Scotland. My heart was beating so loud the whole time I thought I should faint. I was just filled with anxiety about Lucy, not only her health, lest she should suffer from exposure, but for her reputation, in case the story got wind. So when we got in, we washed our feet, we said a prayer of thankfulness together. I tucked her into bed, and before falling asleep, she asked, even implored me not to say a word to anyone, even her mother, about her sleepwalking. I hesitated at first to promise, but on thinking of the state of her mother's health and how the knowledge of such a thing might fret her, and thinking, too, of a story becoming distorted, infallibly it would, in case it should leak out, well, I thought it wiser to do so, and I hope I did right. I've locked the door. The key is tied to my wrist, so perhaps I shall not be again disturbed. And now Lucy is sleeping soundly. The reflex of the dawn is high and far over the sea. Same day, noon. All goes well. Lucy slept till I woke her. She seemed to not have even changed her side. The adventure of the night does not seem to have harmed her. On the contrary, it's benefited her. She looks better this morning than she has in weeks. I was sorry to notice that my clumsiness with the safety pin hurt her. It might have been serious. The skin of her throat has been pierced. I must have pinched up a piece of loose skin. There are 2 little red points, like pinpricks. On the band of her nightdress was a drop of blood, and when I apologized and I was so concerned about it, she laughed and she petted me and said she couldn't even feel it. Fortunately, it can't leave a scar. It's just so tiny. Same day, night. We passed a happy day. The air was clear, the sun was bright, there was a cool breeze. We took our lunch to Mulgrave Woods, Mrs. Westenra driving by the road, and Lucy and I walking up the cliff path and joining her at the gate. I felt a little sad for myself. I could not but feel how absolutely happy it would have been, if Jonathan was here with me. But I must be patient. In the evening we strolled in the casino terrace and heard some good music by Spohr and Mackenzie and went to bed early. Lucy seems more restful than she has been for some time. She fell asleep at once. So I'll lock the door and secure the key the same as before, though I really don't expect any trouble tonight. August 12th. My expectations were wrong. Twice during the night, I was wakened by Lucy trying to get out. She seemed even in her sleep to be impatient at finding the door shut. She went back to bed under a sort of protest. I woke with the dawn. I heard the birds chirping outside the window, and Lucy woke too. I was glad to see she was even better than on the previous morning. All her old gaiety of manner seemed to have come back. She snuggled in beside me. She told me all about Arthur. I told her how anxious I was about Jonathan. She tried to comfort me, and she succeeded somewhat. Sympathy can't alter facts, but it can help to make them more bearable. August 13th. Another quiet day. To bed with the key on my wrist as before. Again, I woke in the night. I found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep, pointing at the window. So I got up quietly and I pulled aside the blind. I looked out, and it was a brilliant moonlight. The soft effect of the light over the sea and the sky, it merged together in a great silent mystery. It was honestly beautiful beyond words. Between me and the moonlight flitted a great bat. It was coming and going in great whirling circles. Once or twice it came quite close, but was, I suppose, frightened at seeing me. So it flitted away across the harbor toward the abbey. When I came back from the window, Lucy had lain down again and was sleeping peacefully. She didn't stir again all night. August 14th. On the East Cliff, reading and writing all day, Lucy seems to have become as much in love with the spot as I am. It's hard to get her away from it when it's time to come home for lunch or tea or dinner. This afternoon she made a funny remark. Well, we were coming home for dinner. We had come to the top of the steps, up from the West Pier. We stopped to look at the view, as we generally do. The setting sun low down in the sky was just dropping behind Kettleness, the red light thrown over the East Cliff and the old abbey. It seemed to bathe everything in a beautiful, rosy glow. We were silent for a while, and suddenly Lucy murmured, as if to herself, "His red eyes again. They're just the same." Well, that was an odd expression, coming apropos of nothing. It startled me. I slewed around a little to see Lucy without, seeming to stare at her. I saw that she was in sort of a half-dreamy state, with an odd look on her face that I could not quite make out, so I said nothing, but I did follow her eyes. She appeared to be looking over at our seat, and there was a dark figure seated alone. I was startled. It seemed for an instant as if the stranger had great eyes like flames. A second look dispelled the illusion, though. The red sunlight was shining on the windows of St. Mary's Church behind our seat, and the sun dipped there. Just sufficient change in the refraction and reflection to make it appear as if the light moved. I called Lucy's attention to the peculiar effect. She became herself with a start, and she looked sad all at the same time. It may have been that she was thinking of that terrible night. We don't refer to it. I've said nothing. We went home to dinner. Lucy had a headache. She went early to bed. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll. I walked along the cliffs to the westward, and I was full of sweet sadness. I was thinking about Jonathan. And when coming home, it was then bright moonlight, so bright that though the front of our part of the crescent was in shadow, everything could be well seen. I threw a glance up at our window and saw Lucy's head leaning out. I thought perhaps she was looking for me. I opened my handkerchief and I waved it, but she didn't notice or make any movement whatsoever. Then, the moonlight crept around an angle of the building. The light fell on the window. There distinctly was Lucy with her head lying up against the side of the windowsill, her eyes shut. She was asleep, and by her, seated on the windowsill, was something that looked like a good-sized bird. I was afraid she might get a chill, so I ran upstairs, but as I came into the room, she was moving back to her bed, fast asleep, breathing heavily, holding her hand to her throat as though to protect it from the cold. I didn't wake her. I tucked her up warmly. I've taken care that the door is locked and the window fastened. She looks so sweet when she sleeps, but she's paler than is her wont, and there's a drawn, haggard look to her eyes, which I really don't like. I fear she's fretting about something, and I just wish that I could find out what it was. August 15th. I rose later than usual. Lucy was languid and tired. She slept on even after we had been called. We had a happy surprise at breakfast. Arthur's father is all better. He wants the marriage to come off soon. Lucy is full of quiet joy. Her mother is glad and sorry all at once. Later on in the day, she told me the cause. She's grieved to lose Lucy, but she's rejoiced that she should soon have someone to protect her. Oh, this poor dear sweet lady. She confided to me she's got her death warrant. She hasn't told Lucy. She made me promise secrecy. Her doctor told her that within a few months, at most, she will die. Her heart is weakening. At any time, even now, a sudden shock would be almost sure to kill her. We were wise to keep from her the affair of the dreadful night of Lucy's sleepwalking. August 17th. No diary for 2 days. I haven't had the heart to write. Some sort of shadowy pall seems to be coming over our happiness. There's no news from Jonathan. Lucy is growing weaker. Her mother's hours are numbering to a close. I don't understand Lucy's fading away as she's doing. She eats well. She sleeps well. She enjoys the fresh air, but all the time the roses in her cheeks are fading, and she gets weaker and more languid day by day. And at night, she gasps as if for air. I keep the key of our door always fastened to my wrist at night, but she gets up, she walks about the room, she sits at the window. Last night I found her leaning out when I woke up, and when I tried to wake her, I couldn't. She was in a faint. When I managed to restore her, she was weak as water. She cried silently between long, painful struggles for breath. When I asked her how she came to be at the window, she shook her head and turned away. I trust her feeling ill may not be from that unlucky prick of the safety pin. I mean, I looked at her throat. The tiny wounds, they don't seem to have healed. They're open. If anything, they're larger than before, the edges of them faintly white. They're like little white dots with red centers. Unless they heal within a day or two, well, I'm going to insist on the doctor seeing them. A letter from Samuel F. Billington and Son, Solicitors, Whitby, to Messrs. Carter, Paterson, and Co., London. August 17th. Dear Sirs, herewith please receive invoice of goods sent by Great Northern Railway. Same are to be delivered at Carfax near Purefleet, immediately on receipt at goods station at King's Cross. The house is at present empty, but enclosed please find keys, all of which are labeled. You will please deposit the boxes, 50 a number, which form the consignment, in the partially ruined building forming part of the house and marked A on rough diagram enclosed. Your agent will easily recognize the locality as it is the ancient chapel of the mansion. The goods leave by the train at 9:30 tonight and will be due at King's Cross at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. As our client wishes the delivery made as soon as possible, we shall be obliged by your having teams ready at King's Cross at the time named and forthwith conveying the goods to destination. In order to obviate any delays possible through any routine requirements as to payment in your departments, I didn't expect that to be so loud, we enclose check herewith for £10, receipt of which please acknowledge. Should the charge be less than this amount, you can return balance. If greater, we shall at once send check for difference on hearing from you. You are to leave the keys on coming away in the main hall of the house, where the proprietor may get them on his entering the house by means of his duplicate key. Pray do not take us as exceedingly the bounds of business courtesy in pressing you in all ways to use the utmost expedition. We are, dear sirs, faithfully yours, Samuel F. Billington and Son. Letter from Messrs. Carter, Paterson and Co., London, to Messrs. Samuel F. Billington and Son, Whitby. August 21st. Dear sirs, we beg to acknowledge £10 received and to return a check of £1, 17 cents 9d. Amount of overplus as shown in receipt account herewith. Goods are delivered in exact accordance with instructions and keys left in parcel in main hall as directed. We are, dear sirs, yours respectfully, Carter, Paterson and Co. August 18th. Mina Murray's journal. I'm happy today. I'm writing sitting on the seat in the churchyard. Lucy is so much better. Last night she slept well all night. She didn't disturb me once. The roses are coming back in her cheeks. She's pale and wan-looking. If she were in any way anemic, I could understand it, but she's just not. She's in gay spirits, full of life, cheerfulness. All the morbid reticence seems to have passed from her, and she's just reminded me, as if I needed any reminding, of that night, and that it was here on this very street that I found her asleep. As she told me, she tapped playfully with the heel of her boot on the stone slab. And then she said, "My poor little feet didn't make much noise then. I dare say poor old Mr. Swales would have told me that it was because I didn't want to wake up Geordie." She was in such a communicative humor. I asked her if she dreamed at all about that night. Before she answered, that sweet, puckered look came into her forehead, which Arthur, I call him Arthur from her habit, says that he loves, and indeed I don't wonder that he does. She went on in a half-dreaming kind of way, as if trying to recall it herself. Well, I didn't quite dream, but it all seemed to be so real. I only wanted to be here in this spot. I don't know why. I was afraid of something, but I don't know what. I do remember, though, I guess I was asleep, passing through the streets over the bridge. Well, a fish leapt as I went by, and I leaned over to look at it, and I heard a lot of dogs howling, and the whole town, it seemed like it was just like full of dogs. They were all howling. So I went up the steps, and then I had this vague memory of something long and dark with red eyes. Just as we saw in the sunset, something sweet and bitter all around me all at once. And then it was like I was sinking into like this deep green water, and there was a singing in my ears, as I've heard there is to drowning men. And then everything seemed like it was passing away from me. My soul seemed to go out of my body and float in the air. And I seemed to remember that once the West Lighthouse was right under me, there was this sort of like agonizing feeling, as if I were in an earthquake. And then I came back and found you shaking my body. I literally, like, I saw you do it before I felt you. And then she laughed. It seemed uncanny to me. I listened to her breathlessly. I didn't like it. I thought it better not to keep her mind on the subject, so we drifted on to other subjects. And, you know, Lucy was like her old self again. So when we got home and the fresh breeze had braced her up, her pale cheeks were more rosy, and her mother rejoiced when she saw her. And, well, we had a very happy evening together. August 19th. Joy, joy, joy! Not all joy, but at last, news of Jonathan! The dear fellow has been ill. That's why he didn't write. I'm not afraid to think it or say it. I know. Mr. Hawkins sent me on the letter and wrote himself so kindly. I'm to leave in the morning and go over to Jonathan and help nurse him if necessary and bring him home. Mr. Hawkins says it would not have been a bad thing if we were to be married out there. Oh, I could have cried over the good sister's letter till I can feel it wet against my bosom where it lies. It's Jonathan, and it must be next to my heart, for he is in my heart. My journey is all mapped out. My luggage is ready. I'm only taking one change of dress. Lucy will bring my trunk to London and keep it until I send for it. For it may be that I must write no more. I must keep it to say to Jonathan, my husband. The letter he has seen and touched must comfort me until we meet. A letter from Sister Agatha from the Hospital of St. Joseph and St. Mary, Budapest, to Miss Wilhelmina Murray. Dear Madam, I write by desire of Mr. Jonathan Harker, who is himself not strong enough to write, though progressing well. Thanks to God and St. Joseph and St. Mary, he has been under our care for nearly 6 weeks, suffering from a violent brain fever. He wishes me to convey his love, and to say that by this post I write for him to Mr. Peter Hawkins, Exeter, to say with his dutiful respects he is sorry for the delay, and that all of his work is completed. He will require some few weeks' rest in our sanatorium on the hills, but will then return. He wishes me to say he has not sufficient money with him, and that he would like to pay for his staying here so that others who need shall not be wanting for help. Believe me. This is this person's sign off is just believe me. I don't know why that's so funny. Send money, believe me. Anyways, sorry. Believe me, Sister Agatha. With sympathy and blessings. P.S. My patient being asleep, I open this to let you know something more. He told me all about you, that you are shortly to be his wife, all blessings to you both. He's had some fearful shock, so says our doctor, and in his delirium, his ravings have been just dreadful. Wolves, poison, blood, ghosts, demons, I fear to say of what. Be careful with him always that there may be nothing to excite him of this kind for a long time to come. The traces of such an illness as his do not lightly die away. We should have written long ago, but we knew nothing of his friends. There was on him nothing that anyone could really understand. He came in on the train from Klausenburg. The guard was told by the station master that he rushed into the station shouting for a ticket for home. Seeing from his violent demeanor he was English, they gave him a ticket for the...
Sorry. They gave him a ticket for the furthest station on the way thither that the train reached. Be assured he is well cared for. He's won all the hearts by his sweetness and gentleness, and he's truly getting on well. I have no doubt he'll in a few weeks be all himself, but be careful of him for safety's sake. There are, I pray God and St. Joseph and St. Mary, many, many happy years for you both. I could tell, because he kept shouting that he was English. I know, I understand that the implication is like he's shouting in English, so everyone's like, he's probably an Englishman, but it was still funny to me. Anyway, back to the good shit. Dr. Seward. August 19th. A strange and sudden change in Renfield last night. About 8 o'clock he began to get excited. He sniffed about as a dog does when setting. The attendant was struck by his manner, and knowing my interest in him encouraged him to talk. He's usually respectful to the attendant, at times servile, but tonight the man tells me he was quite haughty, would not condescend to talk with him at all. All he said is, "I don't want to talk to you. You don't count now. The master is at hand." The attendant thinks it's some sudden form of religious mania, maybe, that has seized him, and if so, we must look out for squalls. A strong man with homicidal and religious mania at once, it might be dangerous. The combination is a dreadful one. At 9 o'clock I visited him myself. His attitude to me was the same as that to the attendant. In his sublime self-feeling, the difference between himself and the attendant seemed to him as nothing. It looks like religious mania. He will soon think that he is himself a god. These infinitesimal distinctions between man and man they're too paltry for an omnipotent being. How these madmen give themselves away. The real God taketh heed lest a sparrow fall, but the God created from human vanity sees no difference between an eagle and a sparrow. If only men knew. For half an hour or more, Renfield kept getting excited in greater and greater degree. I did not pretend to be watching him. I kept strict observation all the same. All at once, this shifty look came into his eyes, which we always see when a madman has seized an idea. With it, the shifty movement of the head and the back, which asylum attendants come to know so well. He was quiet. And he went and sat on the edge of his bed, resignedly, and looked into space with lackluster eyes. I thought I would find out if his apathy were real or only assumed. I tried to lead him to talk of his pets, a theme which had never failed to excite his attention. At first he made no reply, but at length said testily, "I'll bother them all. I don't care about them." "What?" I said. "You don't mean to tell me you don't care about your spiders?" Spiders at present are his hobby. The notebook is filling up with columns and columns of small figures. Anyway, to this he answered enigmatically, "The bride maidens rejoice the eyes that wait the coming of the bride, but when the bride draweth nigh, then the maidens shine not to the eyes that are filled." Well, he wouldn't explain himself, but he remained obstinately seated on his bed all the time I remained with him. I'm weary tonight. I'm in low spirits. I can't help but think of Lucy and how different things might have been. If I don't sleep at once, chloral, the modern Morpheus, I must be careful not to let it grow into a habit. No, I shall take none tonight. I've thought of Lucy. I shall not dishonor her by mixing the two, and if need be, tonight shall be sleepless. Later. I'm glad I made the resolution, gladder that I clept to it. I had lain tossing about. I heard the clock strike only twice when the night watchman came to me, sent up from the ward to say that Renfield had escaped. I threw on my clothes. I ran down at once. My patient, too dangerous a person to be roaming about. Those ideas of his might work out dangerously with strangers. The attendant was waiting for me. He said he saw him not 10 minutes before, asleep in his bed. When he looked through the observation trap in the window, his attention was caught by the sound of the window being wrenched out. He ran back and saw his feet disappear through the window and had at once sent for me. He was only in his night gear and could not be far off. The attendant thought it would be more useful to watch where he should go than to follow him, as he might lose sight of him whilst getting out of the building by the door. He's a bulky man,
He couldn't get through the window. I'm thin, so with his aid I got out, but feet foremost, and, well, as we were only a few feet above ground, I landed unhurt. The attendant told me the patient went to the left and had taken a straight line, so I ran as quickly as I could. As I got through the belt of trees, I saw a white figure scale the high wall which separates our grounds from those of the deserted house. I ran back at once, told the watchman to get 3 or 4 men immediately and follow me to the grounds of Carfax, in case our friend might be dangerous. I got a ladder myself, I crossed the wall, I dropped down on the other side, and I could see Renfield's figure just disappearing behind the angle of the house. So I ran after him. On the far side of the house, I found him pressed close against the old iron-bound oak door of the chapel. He was talking, apparently to someone, but I'm afraid to go near enough to hear what he was saying, lest I might frighten him and he run off. Chasing an errant swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic when the fit of escaping is upon him. After a few minutes, however, I could see that he did not take note of anything around him, and so ventured to draw nearer to him. The more so as my men had now crossed the wall and were closing him in. I heard him. I heard him say,
"I am here to do your bidding, master. I'm your slave, and you're going to reward me because I'm faithful. I've worshipped you long and afar off, and now that you're near, I await your commands. Oh, you won't pass me by. Will you, dear master, in your distribution of good things?"
He is a selfish old beggar, anyhow. He thinks of the loaves and fishes even when he believes he is in a real presence. His manias make a startling combination. When we closed in on him, he fought like a tiger. He is immensely strong. He was more like a wild beast than a man. I never saw a lunatic in such a paroxysm of rage before, and I hope I shall not again. It's a mercy that we have found out his strength and his danger in good time. With strength and determination like this, he might have done wild work before he was caged. But he is safe now, at any rate. Jack Shepherd himself couldn't get free from the straight waistcoat that keeps him restrained, and he's chained to the wall in a padded room. His cries are, at times, awful, but the silences that follow are more deadly. He means murder in every turn and movement. Just now he spoke coherent words for the first time.
"I'll be patient, master. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming."
I took the hint, and I came to. I was too excited to sleep. But this diary has quieted me. Maybe I'll get some sleep tonight. End chapter 8. The end of our reading for tonight. Claps, claps, everybody. Yeah, Renfield looks comfy.
He's a comfy boy.
Yay! So, lots of juicy stuff happening, huh? They haven't explicitly said it, but obviously we believe that Dracula has landed on that ship, that he bit Lucy while she was sleepwalking. Mina says in the reading that we just did that Lucy is like more sensitive to things. I think when she says that, she means like spiritually sensitive or like empathetically sensitive, right? So there's kind of an implication that like her sleepwalking is like, yeah, maybe happening because she's, stressed, which is a thing, but is also exacerbated by like Dracula getting closer and closer to where she lives. Yeah, she gets bit and she gets really sick, but now she's better and I'm sure everything's fine. And they've made it really clear in this reading as well that the only reason that Lucy is okay is because Mina's been with her, but now Mina's leaving because she's heard from Jonathan and she's leaving to be with Jonathan. So what's going to happen back in Whitby? Yes. Steeple's fingers.
We shall have to see. Yeah, I love Mina. I think Mina's great. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I've always assumed, right? Somebody was saying, like, did Dracula cause the storm somehow with his you know, with his Dracula powers? His wags hands around, you know, just general magic shit. Did he cause a storm to force the boat to where Mina and Lucy are? I think so. Because he read all of Jonathan's letters. So, he knows of them. He knows where they are. So, yeah, I think Dracula goes there specifically on purpose. And then turns into a dog. He has lots of animal powers, apparently. He's a dog, and then he's a bat, and then he's a bird. Unless she mistook a bat again for a bird, right? So, yeah. The party is splitting. The party was already split, I guess, the second that Jonathan left, but the party's splitting, dude. Dracula's a wild-shaped druid. So Jonathan has brought doom to them all. Well, Dracula was going to move to England no matter what. But because Jonathan was his solicitor and Dracula became, like, as we established in the first reading, Dracula became kind of obsessed with Jonathan, and read all of his letters and stuff. Yeah, you know, it's bad luck, dude. It's just the bad luck that Jonathan just happened to be the guy. He went out there, and now Dracula's like, I don't know, maybe I'll go chomp on this guy's people. I don't know. I'm sure everything will be fine. Yeah. I can set it now. I can start the new community challenge now. One sec. These are fun. I like doing the readings. I enjoy them. All right. Dracula, chapters 5 through 8. Mark as complete. Yay, we did it. And our watch party is finally happening tomorrow, and then all of our challenges will be done and dusted. Add a new challenge. Dracula, chapters 9 through 12. Let your viewers know what this is. We're gonna read the shit of Dracula, baby. I don't know if it's gonna let me say that. How much was the last one? $1 million? think it was a milli. I think. Da 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 da. There it is. My little devil duker for the icon picture. Yeah, was it 1 million? It was 1 million. Okay, cool. Okay. Create. It let me write that. No, it didn't. This is not compliant with our content guidelines. Okay, well, what if I change it to poop? We're gonna read the poop out of Dracula. Create. Is compliant. They're fine with that. They liked that. There you go. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, start. It's live, baby. I was trying to, I don't know if I was successful, but I was trying to make it so that Mina and Jonathan would kind of match or have like kind of similar color schemes. Jonathan also has like a white neck thing going on and is blue. So I feel like it worked out. Here, I'll show you for any of you who missed. For any of you who missed our last Dracula reading, here I'm not going to show you normal Jonathan. I'm going to show you sad Jonathan because he's the true Jonathan. This is Jonathan. I wanted them to kind of look like they went together. Here's my sweet boy Jonathan. He's a sweet boy, and I'm sure everything's fine with him. I'm sure he's fine. But yeah, I also like Lucy. Lucy was the first one that I made for this section because I was like, I would just want one that looks like really cute, like really cutesy. God, I hope I get to use this one again. I can't remember how much this guy talks. I need to be able to use this one again. Quincy the Texan. The Texan. And she's like, he says all this weird American slang. It's so fun. And then this is Renfield. The one who feels Dracula on the wind and is like, my homie Dracula, he's in town. Facts. So yeah, our watch party tomorrow will be the classic Vampire Dad. We've got a theme right now. It's not even October. But yeah, and we're gonna finally watch Vampire Dad because we've had Vampire Dad on our splash screen. Our normal splash screen. Vampire. Oh, you can't see it. Wait a second. Beep. There's Vampire Dad. He's in the moon. He's in the moon. I can't believe we've been using his likeness for so long and we haven't seen the movie. So we're all gonna watch the movie together. I'm gonna set up timestamps. So if you are unable to do the watch party, which there are plenty of you who won't be able to like utilize the watch party like built-in aspect, We'll have timestamps. So if there's some way that you can watch Vampire Dad, hopefully you can sync it up and use it like riff tracks. I started decorating for Halloween on August 1st. Yeah. There's a piece of well, aside from like the pumpkins and things, I always leave my little fabric pumpkins out all year. But there's a little wooden sign that says "Hello there, pumpkin," and Clark loves it. She keeps it in her room and refuses to let me put it away. So there's like little smatterings of Halloween decor that are just up all year long in our house. What time will that be at? The plan is 9 p.m. England time. So. Yep. Yeah. So if you wanted to tune into that, that would be great. All right. Well, I'm tired. I actually thought that was going to take a bit longer. I feel like the first 4 chapters took us longer to read. TFK, thank you for the 35 months. Shifty Monk for the 66. Shiny Espers for the 10. Little Tattooed Kit Kat, thank you very much for subscribing. Welcome to the Cat Gang. Marlus for the 34. Brad for the 43. W1200, thank you for the 4 years. Happy anniversary. Matt in the chat and John486, thank you again for subscribing. Welcome to the Cat Gang, guys. Cosmos Cats for the 21. Mike Mellon for the 28. And Frankaboom for the 6. Thank you guys very much. We are 15% funded already for Dracula. More Dracula. More Dracula. Slams fist. Oh my god. Masay. Oh my god. We have to go say hi to Masay. Because Masay is... Hollow Knight is my favorite game. For anybody who doesn't know that. Masay is playing Hollow Knight for the first time. I can't believe both Masay and Bree are both like experiencing Hollow Knight fresh, you know? Oh, God. To be a fresh Hollow Knight player. Incredible. But Masay literally just started the game. So go say hi. Bree beat it. Yes! That's my girl. Go say hi to Masay. Spread love, spread joy. We're going to go ahead and raid her. I will be back tomorrow with Saturday Morning Duger, and then a watch party in the evening watching Vampire Dad. So tune into that, and take care of yourselves. Mwah, mwah. Bye-bye. Ooh, I'm still here, but I'm a ghost now. Ooh.